Welcome, everyone, to the Starting Point Education podcast. My name is Loretta Depka, and we're here tonight with Pat Obst, who is a LCSW at the Starting Point, has her practice that specializes in mostly grief and loss, specifically loss of children. So without further ado, this is part 2 on loss of a child. As you know, last week, Pat shared her own personal story about the loss of her infant son, Ricky. She talked about the unique aspects of losing a child and gave us some guidance about grieving and healing through this very difficult kind of loss. Tonight, Pat is going to share with us ways that parents can stay connected with their children. She also will give us some guidance about how to recreate your life after the loss of a child while also bringing your child forward with you. So Pat, you want to just jump right in? Why is it so important that parents stay connected with their children who have passed?
I think, I've talked to some other people who have come from other therapists who don't really know as much about child loss. And one of the things that makes it really unique is that parents don't ever want to be without their children. I use the store analogy. My son used to hide in the clothing racks when he was about 3 years old. Would scare me to death because I would never leave him in a store. I would never want him to be lost in a store. So we as parents can't move forward without our children, and that's a very unique thing. That's different from maybe remembering a spouse who died or a parent. But we really want to be able to bring our child with us. And so that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And it's one of the things that's very different. And that connection that we have with them, it helps us if we stay focused on their life and not their death. Now, early on, we're focused more on the emptiness and their death, maybe how they died. But if we focus on our child's death over the long haul, we will die. We will die slowly. And so that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this, is because I want people to be able to recreate their lives after this loss. The other thing is that when we stay connected with our children, it gives us an opportunity to create new memories. A lot of times we think that once our child has died, all we have is past memories. But that's not true. We create all kinds of memories that are connected with them. I have an album full of pictures. Now, Ricky lived for only 32 and a half hours. So I don't have much. I don't have many memories of him. I have his ultrasound, things like that. But with the walk, the fundraising walk that I did with March of Dimes, we did a butterfly release at his 1 year birthday. There are all kinds of new memories that I have associated with Ricky after he died. And so that's part of what I try to help parents do, is keep connecting with their child and nurturing their child's memory. Because that's the other thing, is our nurturing, that button does not get shut off. We want to continue to nurture our child in some way. And so we have to find those ways. And I'll talk more about that as we go on.
And that's different, isn't it, Pat? I mean, some grief and loss of losing a child, when you would go to a therapist, everyone doesn't necessarily encourage that. Am I wrong in that? Or
yeah, they kind of want you to move on. I had a horrendous story that one therapist, and I'm I'm not mocking therapists. There are a lot of good therapists out there who don't specialize in child loss who've been very helpful to people. Let me say that. But it is a difficult topic, and if you don't really understand it, you can miss some things. I had someone tell me that she went to a therapist, and it was somebody who was actually pregnant, a woman who was pregnant, and the woman told her to write down everything she could think of about her child. And so she did. She went and she wrote several pages, and she read it to the therapist, and the therapist said, "Can I see it?" And she handed it to the therapist. The therapist crumpled it up and threw it in the trash can and said, "Now move on."
Oh.
I was rendered speechless when I heard that.
Right.
So the problem is that people don't understand that part of it, especially that a parent has to figure out a way to bring their child forward with them, because we've spent our whole lives with them with us. Even if they've moved away, adults, had their own children, all of that. So that's an important aspect of it.
Is it important that parents get signs from their child who have passed?
Yes and no. And different people, some people are really into signs, some people aren't. It kind of depends. There are pros and cons with signs. The pros are that they can be comforting, right? I had somebody who, not long after her son died, every time she was a runner, every time she would run on the beach, she would find a sand dollar. And that felt like, kind of a sign from her son. It can make us feel like they're close to us. The cons of signs is that sometimes people depend too much on them, right? What if we don't get a sign? What does that mean? Right? So the opposite. Now, Ricky died 20 years ago. I've never, ever gotten a sign. Never. But yet, he is such a part of my life, and I am so connected to him. So, but I'm also not a big sign person. It's not that I don't believe in them. It's just that's not my go-to thing. They're also is sometimes if people feel that if they've left us and that we're not connected to them and that they're not at peace if we don't get a sign or a dream, that sort of thing. So seeking signs can become almost like I can't move on unless I get a sign. And those are the cons behind them. Really what signs are is we connect with something. We connect that with our child. And whether it's really a sign from the outside or if it's a sign from within us, doesn't really matter. All we know is we've connected with something that reminds us of our child. That's it. That's really what a sign is. So, signs, we just have to not depend on them. And we have to create the connection with our child. And that's really the, I sort of think of signs as sort of the extra, the supplement.
Okay.
It's really about us breathing life into our connection with our child.
So then how does one connect with a lost child?
So there's, I just today, as a matter of fact, had a client who, and this is sort of a sign, but also a way that she can take that sign and continue to use it to connect with her child. So I had a client whose adult son had passed not too long ago, and she was going through one of his bags and she found a bag of rocks, like from the beach, like the little smooth rocks that you find on the beach. And so it felt like kind of a sign from him because he would walk on the beach, to kind of clear his head, and he loved the beach and to take walks. So that was comforting to her. But how she's going to take that then, and she might use some of those rocks to put around like a memorial garden for him. She might carry one with her as sort of, something to always have that she can, hold when she needs to feel him close. So it started out as like a sign, right? But she can continue to connect with that.
Right.
That's a really neat. I told her I was going to use her story today. So here are a lot of different ways that people can connect with their child who has passed, and some of these are things that I've done with Ricky, and a lot of them are from my clients over the years. So again, it's up to us to breathe life into our relationship with our child and in that connection, because the tangible has gone away. We're not touching them, hearing them, seeing them anymore. The intangible is still there. Our love connection with them is still there. So we need to nurture that. So in general, people have memory boxes. They create memory boxes. I actually have a treasure box that has Ricky's things in it because to me, he was a little boy. And so, treasure, pirates, all that kind of stuff.
Sure, that makes
It
sense.
made sense to me. I have a client who's got like a foot locker because her son was a fisherman. He loved to fish. And so he had a lot of his fishing gear in the foot locker. So she's added, other things to that. That's sort of her big memory box that she can go and sit with and maybe go through his things when she needs to feel close to him. Ashes, people have, whether it's jewelry of maybe ashes hanging in a pendant around their neck. I always suggest to people get it glued, because I actually had a client whose necklace opened up and the ashes came out.
Aww.
So I say to people, have them glue it when they put the ashes in there. There's different kinds of jewelry. Some people have their child's fingerprint, can have their child's signature, can have their child's picture lasered on there. I mean, there's all different kinds of jewelry now that people can have, and it's something you have with you, and it makes you feel connected. Journal writing, of course, to your child. That was an idea that I got from a support group 20 years ago. Write to your child. And not only about your feelings of sadness and missing them, or even maybe the woulda, coulda, shouldas and all that kind of stuff, but also about what's going on. Like I wrote in my journal to Ricky about all the money we raised for the walk for March of Dimes. I wrote to Ricky years later when his little brother was coming home, who I adopted. Guess what? Your little brother's coming home. It helps us feel connected to them. Memorial gardens. I have a client whose daughter loved sunflowers. So she has sunflowers, planted outside. I had somebody just tell me that they planted an apple tree, a Granny Smith apple tree, because her daughter loved Granny Smith apples, and her daughter's son helped to plant it.
Oh, wow.
And now he's going to be able to, get the apples from that tree. There's a place called, and if anybody wants to write this down, called personalizationmall.com, mall, M-A-L-L, that has all kinds of, and if you, in the search, put the word memorial, it comes up with all kinds of, wind chimes and pavers and all kinds of things that you can put in memorial gardens. If you create a space, like I have a corner of my yard where those things are. Some people have a corner in their house. I have a corner in my house. It's got my mother's picture and my son's picture, right under that. And so those are other ways. Memorial benches. I have a guy who is getting a memorial bench from the loss of his son. He's going to have it out in the yard, and that's the place where he's going to sit with his grandson his son's son, and tell him stories about his father.
Oh, that's special.
Okay. Which will help him heal and help, his grandson. I have someone who every morning he has coffee out on his balcony with his son. Now his son passed years ago, but that's his ritual. He thinks about his son. He talks to his son. That's his ritual. Morning coffee. I have a woman who has a picture of her son sitting on the kitchen table. They put it at the kitchen table every night, and they have dinner with him because that's what they did when he lived with them. Like having dinner together was very important. So now they have the picture and they have dinner with his picture there. I have a woman whose her son was he probably had ADHD like my son, very bouncy when he was young, she said. And she used to think of him as her little frog. She has frogs all over.
Oh, I love that.
Little, pottery frogs and
Knick-knack frogs, right?
Knick-knack. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. I know a potter who she actually did a plaque for a family that they put next to their daughter's urn. She was able to take the daughter's signature and trace that onto the clay plaque.
Okay.
So that and add flowers and butterflies and that kind of thing to it. So they have the daughter's signature right there. And there are signature necklaces.
Right.
I've had people with tattoos that was from, a note that their child had wrote them, love you, mom, or whatever. And it's in their handwriting. They have it tattooed on their arm. So tattoos, are a big thing. Some people go to vigils. There's groups, children who've died of, some sort of drug-related death. Some hospitals have it if it's, due to some sort of medical thing. Some people, if it was a suicide, there are groups that will hold, annual vigils where parents can come together and support one another. And it sort of connects them with their child because stories are told about the children, the names are read, things like that. Stars, some people name a star after their child. I have the poster in my bedroom of a star that was named after Ricky. Blankets, bears, things like that from their children's clothing that you can get made, quilts, that sort of thing. There's a thing called a Molly bear that I recently found out about. And if anybody wants to go to the site, it's called mollybears.org, MOLLY. And they are weighted bears. It's for people who've lost an infant, like a stillbirth, where you tell them the weight of your child, of your baby, and they will make the bear the same weight.
Oh.
Yeah. Custom portraits. That's where I got Ricky's portrait done because they had to take the tubes out of his mouth. Like they had to remove the tubing from the picture. It's called paintyourlife.com. So that's another resource. If there's if your child's older, of course you have lots of pictures. But sometimes if people have an infant that they've never gotten to see without the tubing and the ventilator and all that kind of stuff, someplace like that can actually make that picture where it looks like the baby's sleeping. Some people, like I said, they collect sand dollars, pennies, feathers, things that remind them, make them think, they're giving me a sign. They're letting me know they're okay. And one other thing is some people, to stay connected is they volunteer. I had somebody who volunteered to foster animals because animals, her daughter was an animal lover. And that was a way that she felt kind of connected in nurturing the animals, because she couldn't nurture her daughter anymore. And that was a way to stay connected. Holidays are tough for people, especially the first couple years. So some things that people do for holidays, I had a woman who, cardinals a lot of times are associated with the spirit of our loved ones, right? So she not only, she got a specific cardinal to represent her son for her Christmas tree, but then she got other cardinals for, other people in her life who she's lost. And like, that's a memorial tree. I've had people put ornaments that have, they're like a little picture frame. And so they don't have a regular Christmas tree. They have a smaller one, and they just put pictures of the person that they've lost. I had a mom whose son died in his 30s, and she had all of his special ornaments. He's into the flyers and the eagles and all that kind of thing. So she got a white Christmas tree and put all these ornaments on it, and it really popped because it wasn't, muted by the green. And she puts that up every year. I had somebody who made a wreath out of her child's just little goofy stuff that she found like in his room. Like, we all have stuff just kind of laying around, and she made a wreath of all those things. And one that I really found interesting was, had a woman who her husband did something behind her back. She came in the house and she's like, "Why are there feathers on the floor?" And she calls up to her husband, and here he bought a bunch of Christmas pillows. They have snowmen or whatever on them, but they were the kind that you can take the stuffing out. He took all the stuffing out, thus the feathers. He put in there, she had bins of her young son's mittens, scarves, clothes. He put that stuff inside the pillows so that when she would sit on the couch and hold the pillow or lean up, it was like her son's thing. And he gave a pillow to their son's siblings.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of a neat idea. Yeah. Birthdays and angel days, which some people call, the death date, or other, tough days. We released butterflies at Ricky's gravesite, and you can do that. There's a company that does that. There can be special pictures that you get made. I had a client who got a special picture where somebody was able to take two of her favorite pictures, individual pictures of her one son who's still living and her son who died, and like bring them kind of together in the picture. So you can get special pictures made. I had somebody whose granddaughter misses her uncle who died, my client's son. And her birthday was coming up, and he died recently. And her granddaughter said, "Well, I'm not going to be able to have a picture with, Uncle so-and-so, in the picture with her." So what they did was they got a picture of him. She held up the picture, and they took a picture.
Oh, great. Good.
Right? I had someone who released rose petals with some of the ashes into the bay. Each family member got a rose petal, and they put ashes, and then they all released them in the bay, and the petals floated down. Apparently there are biodegradable sea turtles that you can get. Wow. And you can put ashes in, and they float out, and then they sink into the ocean.
Wow.
That somebody told me about, because sometimes people are like, they love the shore, they love the beach. I have a client whose still, and it's been several years, she goes out someplace fun, like I think the last one was Dave and Buster's, with a group of her son's friends every year on his birthday, to celebrate him, to celebrate his birthday, and to tell stories and feel close to him. The last thing in this section that I want to talk about is just nurturing your child's memory and legacy. I did that through March of Dimes. You know, that's how I kept, and what I do today, Ricky's legacy. I had a client who donated their son's tools. He had gone to tech school to learn, you know, auto mechanics. They donated his tools. There's a plaque above the tools and everything back to the school where he went. And so that's kind of carrying on his legacy for the students that follow.
Right.
I had a client who started a support group for moms who had lost children to cancer, that she did with her son. Giving donations to a child's cause. I had somebody whose son was very into Greenpeace, you know, the environment and all that. So she continues to volunteer and give funding to them to keep his legacy alive. So those are, you know, different ways that people can, again, breathe life into that connection, because it's so important. You're connecting with them and you're also continuing to nurture them, which is very unique for parents.
So as parents try to move forward to recreate their lives after the loss of their child, what types of things get in the way, and what kinds of things can help them not let things get in the way?
Sometimes people try to jump too quickly to being okay. You're not going to be, first of all, you're never going to be okay with losing your child. Not going to happen. You'll learn to accept it, but you're never going to be okay with it. And it is really, you know, we have to go through it. We can't go around it. So that's one thing that can get in the way, is if people are trying to go around it. Then they end up in my office 5 years later with their life a mess, right? So a lack of acceptance, meaning they stay stuck sometimes in the woulda, coulda, shoulda, and the guilt. There comes a time where we have to let that go so that we can move forward, because we need to clear a path for the connection and the recreating of our lives and of their memories. How can we do that if we're stuck in the woulda, coulda, shouldas? Right? We have to clear that path, and sometimes it takes working with a therapist to do that, because it's really you know pretty complicated. Medication sometimes can be helpful. As long as it's helpful, that's fine. I've had clients be able to heal better because they've been able to maybe manage the anxiety or the depression in order to heal. So that can be helpful. But I've also had clients who, I had one client tell me the anxiety medication that she was taking actually kept her from healing, because she never dealt with a lot of the anger that she was holding in around the circumstance of her daughter's death. So once she stopped that and she sought therapy with me and we worked together, you know, she's been able to move forward now. So medication is different for every person. It can get in the way, or it can actually, you know, facilitate healing. Everybody's different. That's one of the reasons why it's important, I think, too, to work with a therapist. You know, there's some things, other things that help is what I call feeling versus knowing. Over time, we're going to maybe get less signs. We're going to not maybe be crying as much. and we're going to feel like we're kind of getting disconnected. Another reason why it's important to connect in these other ways. But we have to trust that we know we love our children. Just like with a couple, they don't always feel warm and fuzzy with one another, but they know they love each other. In couples counseling, sometimes I would say that to people. Look, right now things are rocky, but do you love each other? Yes. Okay. Interact with each other based on the knowing that you love each other. Forget the feeling part right now. So it's similar with our children. We're not always going to feel them close. You don't need to feel them close all the time. You just know that they're in your heart forever. So focus on the knowing, not necessarily depending on the feeling. We need what I call buoys. I was talking to a client the other day about this, that we need to have ways that we can kind of get back to port. We need to believe certain things, like that I'm going to see my child again, that my child's in a peaceful place, that my efforts to save them, even though in the end they didn't, those efforts were out of love. And so, stop beating ourselves up and that sort of thing. So these things help us they're sort of the buoys along the way to port. When we get all turned upside down with triggers or woulda, coulda, shouldas, we can say, no, wait a minute. I know I'm going to see my child again. I know they struggled and I want them here, but I know that they're at peace. They're not sick anymore. We need to have those things along the way that help give us our footing again. So when we have those, we need to create those. That can help us on our way to recreate our lives after loss as well. Again, if we live based on their death, we will die inside. We need to recreate our lives based on their life, based on our life, and based on the lives of the people who are important to us who are still living. The operative word is life. Early on, we're really dealing with the death. But as we begin to recreate, we have to focus on their life. Does that make sense?
It does.
Right? So those are things that can really help.
Pat, I know we didn't talk about this, but when you have parents, two people who lost a child, I'm assuming everyone grieves differently. Is there a way to go through it together? Or is that a whole nother podcast?
That's a whole nother podcast, but I'll just say this. Statistically, people kind of throw out a general, parents who've lost a child, they get divorced. A lot of them get divorced, right? That's kind of a statistic that's thrown out there. Not really true, first of all.
Okay.
And secondly, it's very specific. Of the people who do get divorced, it's usually because of one of two things. One, there's blame. Like somebody, left a child in a hot car, that sort of thing. There is direct blame. Those marriages usually don't last. The other is if you don't allow each other to grieve in your own way. You're trying to force the other person, come on, get over it kind of thing, or forcing somebody to go your way with your grief. So there has to be a level of respect for each other's grieving process. Those are the only the main two reasons why people split. Otherwise, they usually pull together and become each other's ally and support and like that. But that is another podcast on how to do that.
I imagine that is incredibly difficult.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. So the last question?
What are some of the ways that you and your clients have recreated your lives after the loss of your children while bringing your children forward with you?
So for me, it was, the major way that it changed is that, in what I do every day, which is it shifted my whole therapy practice to grief, becoming a grief therapist. So for me, it was a seismic shift. For other people, it's not as much. I had a woman who, when she took the time to kind of process her through her guilt and her anger and get all that out of the way, she has a much better relationship with her daughter in her mind, right? Because she worked through the things she had to about her daughter's addiction and whatnot. So she's able to feel comfort and connection with her that she wasn't able to before. So then her relationship with her husband is much better because they're, again, it's not focused on the anger. They're able to they share hiking and golfing. They got their first real Christmas tree again after 5 years as a family. So those are some ways that because they found ways to incorporate their daughter's memory now into the holidays. I had a client who lost an infant son, and because of that, she went into nursing. Changed the trajectory of what she did, in her job. Some people, I had a client who went back to church after she lost her son, and back to, she actually did a lot of the children's sermons, with the little ones that made her feel, like her life had purpose and meaning. That's a big part of recreating your life. You have to begin to feel like your life has purpose and meaning again. Not just about your child, because let's face it, all of us were individuals before we were ever parents. So that part of us is still there. Being able to tap back into what you enjoyed in life, what gave your life purpose and meaning is really important. I have clients who their house became just a cluttered mess after their son died. There was a lot of chaos in his mental health issues and everything. And so them keeping the house in chaos was sort of a subconscious way of not moving on from him, like from his when he was alive. And they've finally been able to, their house is beautiful now. And they have a better relationship with their other son who was being very affected by that. And now they can share in their home together. They can have friends over. They snapped me a picture of when they had their first holiday dinner there, those kinds of things. Sometimes us moving on is that we restore our own mental health. I had somebody who was kind of stuck in depression and OCD that she had before her son died, and then it got worse after. And part of the work that she did is, along with our grief therapy, she worked with an OCD therapist and actually improved her own mental health that were issues. She cleared out stuff from her past that had nothing to do with her child. So sometimes we can restore our own mental health, heal wounds that have nothing to do with our children. And that's another way that we can recreate our lives. Lastly, I'm not sure if these pictures are going to show up or not. We will someday. We'll learn how to put them on the actual podcast. But in the past, on some of my other Doing Grief Well podcasts, I've talked about a client of mine named Janice, and she's okay with me using her name, and her daughter Erica, who was murdered. And it was a horrific loss for her only child. Dennis and I worked together for a long time, and I'm not going to tell the whole story of her healing, but the way that last week, I said lakes and ukuleles, right?
Right. I remember that.
So here's a person who, when I first started to see her, wanted to end her life. She was in such pain. And now she lives out in the Midwest on a lake, and she and her husband are in a ukulele group. There's like all these people once a week who play ukuleles, and she's okay with me showing the picture. So I'm not sure, you can tell me if that's coming up.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
So she's there with the ukulele, and those pictures are pictures they've taken on the lake, and they're selling them at a craft fair to raise money for the ukulele club.
That's great.
And here is a picture of her on the boat on the lake with the two holes.
Great.
Okay. So I have a picture of her in my phone holding up a picture of her daughter. And it was not long after she was murdered. And of course, devastation all over her face. And then you just saw the pictures, grinning ear to ear. You can recreate your life after loss. It takes time. It takes purposeful effort. It takes a lot of support. But what greater honor to your child that you've lost than that you live on, and live on well.
I think that's a great place to end, Pat.
So that's what I try to help people do, work through that process.
Well, thank you. I can't thank you enough for doing this. I will have this posted on our education channel at the Starting Point. Simply go to startingpoint.org, and you can click on the education YouTube station, and you're right there. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it.
Take care.